The importance of education can never be overestimated. We know as parents, as concerned citizens, as policymakers, how everybody is so concerned about the future of the children, and this future is always the function of the education that we give to our children. Just imagine a situation when the time to admit our children to schools comes, how worried we are. How do we want to get the best possible school for our children, and how do we make efforts? We frantically look for the schools that give good education. But there are certain questions that we need to ask ourselves. What comprises a good school? Are our schools so good that they can prepare our children for the future challenges, for the kind of skills and for the kind of professional competence that is now needed in the years to come? These are the questions that as parents we need to ask ourselves. Then there is a different set of questions, and it is our schools, which we have two types of schools. One is the government schools and another private schools. Government schools, unfortunately, as the public perception is, and evidence also supports it, that they haven't been functioning to the optimum level. What are the reasons for that? Government needs to look into it. But as a matter of fact, the preference, the choice of the parents is that our children should get an admission in a good private school. But ask the private schools, are they future ready? Are the processes and the systems in place in our schools? But on the other side, if you talk to any private school owner or manager or those who run these schools, they will tell you that there are 100 types of difficulties that they are besieged with. They find that the new regulatory framework, the public perception as debilitating for their functioning. So where is the truth? Why are we facing these contradictions and inconsistencies? That on the one hand we need a good private school, on the other the perception is that they exploit, that they don't give good education. The private schools on their part say that whatever we want to do, it needs finances, and the regulatory framework is quite debilitating in that sense. So what do we do now, and where do we go from here? How do we ensure that schools are good, schools function in a proper regulatory framework, but at the same time that they are financially viable? So to discuss all these things, we have with us in our studio today someone who has seen this schooling system all over the world. He has been to different parts of the globe, South Africa, Middle East, Southeast Asia, Europe, and he has run the schools, actually the global chains. He has established schools, and with over an experience of over 40 years, now he is back to his roots. He is in Kashmir now, trying to contribute whatever he can to uplift the schooling system here, to upgrade the processes, and to give us an outlook that is really global. I welcome you, Dr. Farooq Wasil, to our studio today. To begin with, we will have a discussion on what a good schooling system is, how a regulatory framework should be. But just give me an idea. This has been an eventful journey for you, that you have been to places, many, South Africa, Middle East, Southeast Asia, and then running global chains in India. Tell us something about this journey.
Thank you, Mohammed Saab, for hosting me. This is really a wonderful opportunity.
You're always welcome.
I think primarily if you look at, say, my first placement in UAE, UAE was actually trying to find itself. I mean, if you look at my journey, it's as old as UAE as a country is.
So it's not the UAE of G20 times.
Exactly. You look at, no, what I'm looking at, the parallel I'm drawing, that the country, when we entered, it was a virgin landscape. There were no referral points for us. We had no idea of what good education is all about. But over these last 30 years, the country has evolved as being the epicenter of trade, commerce, education, healthcare, diplomacy, everything is there. So the way country is shaped, and we were also shaped in the process.
Which is in a way phenomenal.
We were shaped in the processing. So looking at schools, I'm sure that they were similar schools, what we have here today, and what they were in 1983. So there was a conscious and a deliberate attempt on the part of visionaries there in terms of transforming that landscape. And it was a mission for them. It was not a government mandate only. Everyone involved, I think, realized at very early stage that if we have to create a genuine welfare state, then education is the key contributor. I strongly believe whatever the problems, education is the answer. And that means also being transparent, open and bold to accept who you are and where you are. See, every journey, they say the journey of 1,000 miles starts with that one single step.
Right.
But you must have a sense of that one step, in what direction we are taking it, What are the kind of skill sets available to us, what kind of knowledge domain we have, so that the journey becomes more productive and meaningful in years to come.
So how was your experience there, and how did you move from Middle East then
So
to
in fact,
Africa?
1980s, if you look at my education journey, ours was the first batch of MA education in Kashmir University.
Oh.
So Professor Salamtullah was the head of, it was the new department launched by the University of Kashmir. And I finished my master's. I was a student activist as well, in terms of, activism was defined differently that time. You are into discourses, your debates, and there was baitbazi, there was, cultural activities. And genuinely, I would say, an inclusive environment where the student activist was one who was good in studies and good in other activities as well. We have our own thought process, our own opinions, and it was a nice, credible, intellectual discourse around it. Will shape you.
Dr. Wasil, before I asked you about your experience in South Africa and how did you go there and what did you do there, just a curiosity that your educational background, it could have easily earned you a position somewhere in here a university or anywhere in the India. So how did the schooling happen to you?
No, exactly. If you look at it, when I finished my PhD, I actually thought to myself, what am I supposed to do? Honestly, job was not, my liking. I wasn't developed or designed that way. I felt very uneasy. I said, what's left for us? And because there were a lot of my friends who went outside, I almost thought, okay, let me go, experience myself and come back. No, that was a very simple thought that time. There was nothing in mind. And I went, I was very young, 28-year-old. I was offered as a deputy head of a big school. This was this guy from Australia, Oscar Henderson, who interviewed me. And when he saw me, there were a lot of candidates outside in Ashoka Hotel who were my senior and came from very good background, some of the elite schools in India. Somehow he picked on me. And
and that's how it happened.
I left Valley. Honestly, that time the whole thing in my mind was couple of years and we are back. It did not happen. So I always say this is the divine design. No matter what you do, you have to be where he takes
and this
you.
couple of years turned into
more than four decades. Four decades.
So something about South Africa experience.
No, Africa project came as a part of, when we were doing exceptionally well in the premium schools and, mid-market schools, which we developed, and there was a very global network of these schools. Then chairman that time said that I think he genuinely believed that education is a birthright, and we must create an enabling environment and an ecosystem and a footfall for those children who are left outside the school. So Africa initiative was mostly affordable schools, at the low cost, but quality education. The problem with affordability, the mindset and how it is being perceived is affordability does not go well with the quality. People think affordability means a notional understanding, they must have a school. No, but the idea was that at an affordable cost, we must be in a position to give them credible education. And it was possible. It was possible because a lot of those costs, which we would have incurred in terms of having a new chain set up, a lot of these resources were taken from these premium schools to be used there. So that's a cost saving. One. Second thing was that we tried to see that our brick and mortar is simple. It's nothing, fancy about it. It's functional. Third was that within the ecosystem, what we did, we allowed our premium schools, let's say American Academy we had, where the fee point was more than $50,000 a year. So these schools to adapt these smaller schools. So you create a genuine compassion and a sense of responsibility among the children. So, and then we curated a curriculum, and then those schools were doing fantastically well. And those children were equally doing very well. This notion of just because they are economically marginalized, they will not compete on the same merit. They will definitely. It's a question of, so what is important? The essence of, it's the people who make the difference.
So Dr. Wasil, this idea of an affordable education system, it strikes a chord here also. We all need quality education. Then what stops many of us to get that quality education is that we cannot maybe financially afford it. So how do you strike a balance between the two? As you said, that if you have affordable thing, then the quality gets compromised. Here also, schools often complain of this. They say that it doesn't fit into our budget. Our finances go for a toss when we start making it too affordable for the people. So how do you strike a balance between the two?
You see, an educator needs to be an adventurist. Nothing should stop experimenting. You see, all these beliefs or assumptions are death knell because they are not being tested. How do we say we cannot develop credible, affordable schools? So we can define affordability in a context. You see, every economy has a context. So if I have to define affordability here, we will have the fee point which will not hurt even the lowest wage earner. However, in terms of creating quality impact is about the resources inside the school, the capacity of the people. Even in the ecosystem where you have the best of the schools, they wanted for many reasons. We have very least investment in human capacity building. We have very least investment in actually teaching learning resources. So therefore, we may have the they say you may have marble halls but muddy teaching. But you may have marble teaching in muddy halls.
So that's a good way of putting it. So before we come to this capacity building of our teachers, putting in right processes, getting in professionalism in our schools, I'll take you back to this thing, that our schooling system, which started with the government, it was all free. Then came the conscious people in community who established the schools that were almost free. They would charge very less fee. But over a period of time, we saw that there was a sort of a collapse of the systems. Government schools didn't function as well as they were supposed to. Those community schools which were established, lots of effort went into those schools, but they also faced problems and their finances were so weak that they one by one they are getting closed. Then came a stage when some entrepreneurial minds, entrepreneurial persons came to the fore and they established schools which are running very well. But there the problem is that the public perception is they're not educationists and they run the schools in a way that, if we can call it as, it is a sort of exploitation, it is profiteering, they charge too high for too little. In this kind of a scenario, when a regulator comes in, which has come in here in post 2014, there is lots of discomfort in the schools. Schools say that this regulatory framework is, it doesn't take into account the financial needs of a school. On the other side, the regulator says that we are not in a habit of being compliant towards the regulations. So where is the disconnect? How do we deal with this disconnect and how we can save our private schools, which are playing a role in our society, which government also says we need, because we don't have the wherewithal, we don't have the resources to have schools in every nook and corner. So how do we have a good private school that is compliant in terms of regulations, and also its finances work good?
See, we are not unique in a way that we have a private school system. It's all across the globe. Yeah. Private enterprise do exist, and they have a customer base. There are people who have attraction for private schools. But the problem is that if you compare to...
As an educationist, do you believe that we should have private schools?
Yes, why not? But the question here is, when you say education not for profit, then how do you expect them to run when the costs are same? Even more, because expectations are more. The problem is when the government school system fails to live its expectations, private school is actually doing the government's job. This is one thing, because education is a fundamental right. Let us say if we have 4,000 schools in Valley today, this is around 700,000 students. If suppose we never had private schools, let us say they're profiteering, they're not viable option for us. Whose responsibility is to have these children educated? Of course, government. So where is that response? Who is holding them accountable for this lapse then? One. Secondly, the existing ecosystem of government schools in terms of both performance and accessibility. Do a piece of research and see what kind of schools we are running, what kind of ratios we have inside. Even this rationalization exercise, what they do in terms of creating a better fit between teacher and teacher-pupil ratios. The teachers, if you have maybe roughly 150,000 teachers across this educational ecosystem. I call it an employment sector. It's not an empowerment sector. There are a lot of things which need to be questioned, and how this recruitment process happens, how schools are being run, how the efficiencies on a scale is being achieved. This is one. Second thing is, when you regulate an environment, what are the lessons we are drawing from some of the best regulated boards in the world, or regulatory entities in the world? Now, if you look at, say, 1962, the Ofsted in England was introduced to audit the schools. And this audit was not punitive. It was developmental. You see, they used to identify the schools who were wanted in terms of, say, capacity building, wanted in terms of curriculum enrichment, wanted in terms of diversity of programs to be offered inside the schools. So once they will come with their findings, they will support them in enhancing those areas, and then again review the process. There is a supporting mechanism. So it's not punitive. So, but the problem here is, while you regulate them on multiple counts, what is the mechanism to help schools? Suppose 20 years back, the schools which have been in existence and doing a good service, the notional fee point, how it is going to today meet the expectations of this young generation of parents and the expectation of the quality outcomes from the education. They will never be in a position to support it.
Dr. Wasil, if I can add to it here, that we have almost a dozen of schools that can fit into these top-notch schools who have a good fee point, who run very well, good infrastructure. Most of the schools, if we go in city and in villages and in towns, they are, you can say that they are mid-cap schools or even below that. If they don't have salaries, good salaries for the teachers, how can they do this audit of the school? How can they spare money for the capacity building? How can they raise more infrastructure? It's not just possible for them. If you say that we audit the schools and then maybe we can get 10 different evidences in favor of them, how do you connect the regulator and the schools through this process of audit?
See, my only worry is, let us say, if we allow schools to operate in any form, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of quality of teachers, in terms of quality of resources. So you will have a huge eclectic mix and variance. But isn't that the common belief is that every child matters and every child should have an access to good quality education? How will you ensure this? So by design, you are actually creating a class of people who are successful, and there are a large number of students who are left behind. See, this tyranny of normal, our system, it's based on that the bright ones are getting through and the weaker ones are left behind. Not that weaker ones are, genetically disadvantaged. They are disadvantaged because of the system around.
So there is a structural disadvantage that works against
absolutely. You look at it today. Suppose you have these coaching centers. I mean, India educational ecosystem has its own challenges. If you see that coaching center is a parallel education. It has more money than schooling.
That is.
So what are we operating two systems, and how can then school take the credit of saying that this is my production?
In fact, it is affecting adversely the schools, because now we do get this news from around that there are dummy admissions happening in the schools, and then the children actually go to the coaching centers. I'll come back to this question, that what should be a good school? How it should look like what? Give us a description.
You see, what qualifies school to be a good school? One is our, notion, what you call the archetype of human intelligence. Culturally, we have a notion of a good school of a very big building. Yeah. And even if you look at it today, this same perception is around, and people are of the firm belief and opinion that a good school means impressive building. Now, if I ask you a question, all these schools with beautiful infrastructure, how do we know they're good schools?
That is what I want to know.
So therefore, we need to really, question ourselves how good I am. And if I am good, how do I know I am good? What does it mean? It means the end product that is being generated year after year from these schools. How much, they get absorbed in the mainstream, how much contribution they make towards the development and well-being, how ethical they are in their conduct, what kind of generation we are preparing to create a better world for ourselves. our children in these so-called English medium schools, if you look at their communication levels, I'm sure you're from media studies, you have studied communication very well. Look at the proficiency level of communication. And more so is that if English is the trade-off, if English is the only language which they claim it's an English medium school, because we still believe that English is the passport for better employability and better life.
That's true.
So therefore, if that is our belief system, what should we strengthen? We should strengthen these things. So therefore, audit is not about only the infrastructure, safety and security. Audit is around on multiple factors we look into. We look at leadership. We look at the quality of the curriculum. We look at the quality of assessments. So therefore, how do we know schools are? If you look at it, schools are not credible in their assessments when it comes to children.
So now, since you are back to Valley now, you have also started this educational services platform as Thinksite. You are doing audit of the schools. How is an audit or a review of a school going to help the school and the regulator, both of them?
You see, for regulator, they need to come up with a genuine understanding and a collaboration with stakeholders. You cannot take a decision in a boardroom and say this is what it is. Now, we had a few discourses with the private schools where there's a genuine kind of concern. Suppose I met a school owner who started school some 25 years back with a fee point of 200 rupees, and today it's 500 rupees. And I feel sorry, I feel sad for him. Now, if he would have, invested that time and money and effort into even suppose, buying a land, today he would have been a multimillionaire.
Oh, that's true.
Because he was a social entrepreneur, he wanted to do social good. Because he does not fit into your new scheme of work, so, he gets punished. So how do you recognize his contribution and then help this school, which is already having a legacy of more than 2 decades, to become a better school?
That is a genuine concern. Since you have worked on this affordable education in a vast area as Africa, you work there with the government, with the private sector. Sometimes we get this feeling that high fee point is an exploitation. But if the fee point is as low as 300 or 400 or 500, do you think this is also a form of exploitation? Because you cannot give education, good education.
I said it. In fact, I said it, to the point of, being rude to them. I said, if this is not working now, close. But then you have another moral, question here. What happens to those kids? Where they will go? Even notional education for that matter.
How you as an educationist, now running this, being the director of the Thinksite, how you're going to help the schools and also the general landscape of ecosystem of education?
You see, if you look at it today, let's say new policy on education. It is talking about school complexes. Problem in Valley is the good schools, let us say per se in terms of where there is a high P point, good infrastructure, financially viable. They must also create some ecosystem where they collaborate. They provide some help, assistance. Because, you see, if you have a training program, you as a school have the capacity to invest. Why don't you help other school teachers to come and be part of that training program? They will also at least improve over a period of time. This is one way of, where there has to be a collaborative network and a genuine feeling that I'm not a school by myself. I have other responsibilities. So schools are not collaborative here in Valley, to be very honest with you. It's a very regressive environment I have seen with the school owners. I don't know, and they're holding this key belief that, if they become secretive, their survival is guaranteed. Tell me, in this age and time, who will take a claim that I know it too well?
No, that's a given. The information is out in the open. You can only be transparent now. But the insecurities that we have in the private school sector, those who are running it, you also will have to handhold them to come out of those insecurities and actually perform the job that they are supposed to by merely creating an atmosphere of scare around them. That's counterproductive.
No, but private schools themselves also
I can act as devil's advocate, but we need to ask
they
those
have to
questions
be
as
blamed for many reasons. Suppose you have a soft power. You have 4,000 schools. Let us say if we classify these 4,000 schools, let us say we have 50% schools who are at the verge of extinction. Accept it, I have no problem with it. But the other 2,000 schools, what are they doing to improve themselves? And the improvement cannot come individually. They have to think collectively in terms of supporting each other. Hub and spoke model can be developed. Let us say you have an anchor school in particular geography, and then you have 10 schools attached to them for capacity building. This will also give us some insight how well these schools, good schools, are doing. Yeah. See, if they have good practices, if they have good outcomes on what they do, then it will show in the schools where they're challenged, they're wanted, they're marginalized. And here the problem is, under the same one brush, what we are trying to achieve is who owns the failure? Somebody has to account for it. The regulatory must also recognize that they need to come up with a framework where they don't become punitive, they allow schools to develop, and they also come to some realization where there is a framework which defines that schools which cannot operate under this, I mean, you need to have minimum acceptability, minimum compliance. You know, and this minimum compliance also has to be realistic. You cannot have two yardsticks. When you expect a sky from private schools, yet your government's buildings are dilapidated, you have two-room schools running, you have single-teacher schools, it doesn't match. It doesn't match. So private schools' problem is their discourse is very poor. They are not collaborative internally. So, you know, which has given them, where the regulator is become punitive. Where is the decent dialogue around that you regulate us, but please, these are our issues. How can we address it?
There is another problem, Dr. Wasil. As an individual, I would always yearn that my child gets admission in the best of the schools, no matter how much I'll have to pay. But when I am part of the collective, I also join the bandwagon of those people who say that private schools are exploiters, the fee point is high, they don't give us good education. When we go to the regulator with these complaints and they see that parents are agonized, so I mean it will have an effect on the regulator's mind also. If in presence of such a perception, regulator finds it very difficult to glean the evidence from the other side. What should we do as a community, a regulator there and private schools, so that there is a network and we base our decisions on the basis of evidence and not run ourselves on the waves of the perception?
You see, on school regulatory ecosystem, there are a lot of good systems, process and practices. But the question is schools don't have it, unfortunately. Let us say, what is the, when critical incident policy inside the school? What is the risk mitigation policy inside the school? How do they anticipate risks around? Because you see, school is an organic entity. It's a society within a society. Today you have these drug menace. How are schools taking it upon themselves as a responsibility to develop very conscious, responsible students so that they don't get into this, vice? So this is one way of looking at it. My only problem comes that schools themselves are not courageous enough to create transparency. You see, parent is an equally stakeholder. The moment you make him stakeholder, you will not have these problems. The problem is you are seeing parent as the other person. How is it that when he entrusted the most prized possession in your care?
So that means the schools need to empower themselves, have this capacity to reach out to the parent, talk to him where the problems are, and then build a perception that schools are actually conscious of their community role.
I always believe there are three instruments which regulator, school, a parent, and other stakeholders in the society should have. And these are common for everyone. One is instruction. Whatever your belief, whatever your communication, whatever your vision and mission and value chain you speak. One is instruction, second is example. You have to be a living example of that belief. So when you say vision of a school, it's a promise to your parents. When I say I'm a 21st century school and I get inside, I see didactic classrooms, very rigorous learning teaching environment, is this a promise? It's an absolute lie. So instruction, example, and influence. A parent has to be an example of what he says, and that will influence the child. A school leadership has to give instruction and be an example of that instruction, and that influences the child. Stakeholders, or regulator for that matter, has to be, when he gives regulatory framework, he has to live it by example and then influence. It's a very simple analogy I am developing, that if this ecosystem has to be supported. You see, we understand.
And your experience, and now that you are doing things at Thinksite, help in this? Because finally we are a part of this society.
See, Thinksite, if you look at it, the journey for the last 7-8 months, I'm hopeful. You see, I'm optimistic. There is this Harvard historian, Paris Landis. He says the people who are successful in the world are the people who are optimistic. Not that they were always right, but they were optimistic, and open optimism pays. You see, there are very pain points, there are very defining moments when you see this will not work. But that is what will show resilience of a leader who genuinely have a compassion to believe. See, we have had discourses with the private schools, and I'm sure there's a way out of it. But obviously, to a point, we should not give up. I always believe we have to collaborate. Humans can only empower themselves through collaboration. It's a collective human intelligence. Nobody's an island by itself. Like Kashmir Educational Forum has a context, Kashmir schools have a context, regulatory compliance have a context. We have certain unique dispositioning also. We need to recognize that. Our children are still not living a normal life. So schools become the epicenter of our future. You see, future is not a time or a date on calendar. It's a dream. It's a hope. And that hope is inside the classroom, the child. So if you freeze that, you're freezing your future.
That's very pertinent when you say that the station of our future is actually the classroom. So we need to be, as a community, very conscious about that and not create problems for those who run the schools. At the same time, hold them accountable and responsible for what they are doing in the school. So that means, if I could understand it, that the government concerned departments, the parents, the community, and the schools, all of them need to be, the center of it should be the child who is in the school. His education is what actually matters.
If the child doesn't know why he's there, I'll give you an example. A couple of years back, I went to Kashmir University, a friend of mine. I spoke to these law graduates. And Mehmood Sahab, you will not believe, I asked them, why are you here? 98% said, we just got the admission. What does it really mean? If you don't have a sense after spending 18 years of schooling that who you are, what you want in life, then you are free to do what you want to do.
But Dr. Wasil, having come from this place, having all my schooling here, our parents actually get serious about our education when we are in, say, 10th grade and then 12th grade. We miss all those lower classes, and we believe, somehow we tend to believe, that these are the schools that it is a matter of the of growing up of a child year by year. He will eventually be in the 10th grade, and then we'll get serious about the schooling. How important the early years are, and what is Thinksite doing in that to build that sense of urgency in the schools, that early years are very crucial, and the new set of skills that we need for our children, given this AI revolution, given the new kind of jobs that will emerge and the old job patterns will end. So how crucial is it, and what are you doing?
I think, it will be difficult to philosophically to get it across. I'll use a simple example. The students who graduated from, say, good schools, Doon or Bishop Courts, or you say Muir College, or say Loudale, where are they today? If early schooling does not matter, if that is not empowering, and if that is not, showing up the way to the ladder and way forward, I think we can draw parallel. And more so.
But the financial modeling of those.
This is perfectly all right. But what I'm saying, that if you draw a parallel, those who had the ability to go there and make sense of it, they have been successful in life. You also will see that during our times, when there was a resource crunch, and the most enticing and most empowering factor was teachers' commitment beyond the four walls of classroom. He has no good pay packet. He was socially challenged. But he, what you call, they used to say, ye tarbiyat gah hai. What is tarbiyat? Tarbiyat is not instruction. Tarbiyat is not getting marks and grades. It was a development of a wholesome personality, where when we have grown up, we grew up with sense of responsibility towards ourselves, towards our family, towards our extended family and the community at large. So you have those people who had very ordinary educational environment available to them, but highly compassionate and driven by compassion and the merit of their journey.
Dr. Wasil, there is an endless discussion. We need to know many things from you about the schooling, about what the future has in store for us. We'll be doing these discussions with you, but if we sum it up, give me a couple of things that the schools should do, that the community or the parents must do, and that the regulator must be mindful of. If we connect.
No, schools must start getting transparent. They must not hide, because there is no way they can hide.
What is the first step of being transparent?
Transparency is that make parents stakeholders in decision-making process. If you share a problem, let them own the problem.
How would your school review help in that?
School will help. First, you will understand that whether you have an ecosystem, do you have necessary systems and processes which regulate this kind of environment. You see, how do you build the trust around with your stakeholders? Parents, you are a very active stakeholder. If he does not trust you, whatever dialogue you will have, whatever functions you do inside the school, it means nothing because you already built up a perception about yourself with the stakeholder.
And do they need to invest on the capacity building of the teachers? Because finally it is the
You see,
teacher who transacts.
Great teachers make great schools. Mahmood Sahab, anywhere you go, no matter what kind of technology. I wish we had time to debate this. You can have a fancy school, you can have all the wealth inside the school in terms of infrastructure and facilities. At the end of the day, it's the teacher's capacity that will empower and that will really make them great schools. If they say credible teachers, great teachers make great schools.
But what is saddening here is that we have the teachers who have good qualification. You get them into private schools and they get peanuts salaries. They are demoralized, and over time they think that no matter what they do, they are not going to get a decent salary. And you ask the schools, they say that we want to give them good salary, but the regulator doesn't allow us to have a corresponding fee hike. So how do we untie this knot?
No, you see, again, it's a relentless dialogue with the regulator, but this has to be based on the merit of the argument. It cannot be built on perceptions. You know, if like Thinksite has offered a lot of assistance to private school association in terms of, ironing it out, they can use this advocacy. It's not fighting. We are equal partners. I think, you see, we must see regulator as a friend and have a definite merit-based argument. And if there are genuine concerns, then we also should take it into our stride that we also need to address these concerns. So it's not one-way traffic. It's not your way, my way or highway. It's a question of getting regulated. How many times, say, private school association, as their functioning or governing board has invited regulators to understand the problem? And do private school association have understanding of what are the pain points for these schools of different scales in different geographies? What can private school do? I was the chairman of the CBSE schools in the Gulf, and we had the similar issues to start with, but eventually it became a robust body which really delivered teacher capacity building across GCC, which had its own educational journal which were addressing quality issues. Let us say NEP is this. Who should lead this initiative of creating awareness? And what are the implications of private schools? Other than that, so say private schools, there must be some kind of a regulatory body within themselves to regulate their academic environment, to bring in some kind of alignment.
Rather than each time complaining about things.
To bring some kind of alignment, in fact, to show the way forward. You see, private schools, our notion is they are good schools and better schools. What does that mean? There must be better leadership, there must be better discourses, they must reach out. It's not happening.
Dr. Sir, it is getting so interested. I wish we had on the panel someone from the regulatory framework departments, and we would definitely try to get people from their side also, so that we listen to them and we get these people connected. One thing that you use this problem of drug abuse. This is a grave concern these days. Everyone, there isn't a person in this landscape who is not worried about the future of the child because this, rising levels of drug abuse. How would you, as an educator, employ a school, private or government, to fight this menace?
It's a very difficult question. You see, I again always say a school is a society within a society. You see, this ecosystem cannot be alone supported by the school. Parents have, when I say parents have to be equally stakeholder, then they must be willing to really make those sacrifices and listen to the kind of advices that is being given periodically in the parent forums or other discourses. So it is also not that schools entirely will be in a position to fight this out. I think there are many things which have a deeper questions about it. What is the source? How it is getting there? See, even when we say if our religious bodies can address it, they alone cannot address it at the end of the day, because it's a habit, it's a painful journey. Look at the avenues that are available to our youth not to be resorting to take the substance. We have closed all those avenues. I can't see in my neighborhood a small park where these little ones can go and spread their legs and do some exercise. I mean, it's really, but to be very honest, Mom Sahab, sometimes to the point of really breaking down, when you look at these kids, they have no avenue to express themselves. They're a bundle of energies. How do we channelize this energy? So you have to create, this is a very regressive way. I mean, we had the 3 decades of, uncertainties around, and that has played with these generations. So it's not one thing that has really created this thing. And also I think I can bring you to, schools must have 4 C's. One is the intellectual capital. Intellectual capital is the knowledge, the skill sets of those inside the school and outside the school. And outside the school we never use.
No, no, we don't.
You understand? So it's the intellectual capital, then you have the social capital. It is relationships, both formal and informal. Tell me which school has these relationships, which are informal. There's a big threat perception. If I go into a school, I see we volunteered ourselves. Thinksite volunteer, and our mandate is not. I don't have a mandate to make it a living. God has been kind. We can otherwise survive and enjoy ourselves, alhamdulillah. But this is a genuine desire that in a small whatever is left of us. I'm talking of the times for the children when I will not be there. I have a very short life phase available to us. With us, if we can do something credible there, so we can make some difference to these schools. So social capital is formal and informal relation to rebuild across the network of schools. Then you have the spiritual capital. What kind of moral campus inside the school? That is my own conduct, my own behavior, my own value chain, my own personal sacrifices. Okay, then the last capital is financial capital. So if you don't have all these forces integrated, you can never have a good school ecosystem around.
That's true. Dr. Sir, your insights into this education, your experience and knowledge about it, it is such an interesting discussion with you. We'd like to have you some other time also to discuss it more and deconstruct it. We have problems in this landscape, but as you say that time is always a limit. There is a finitude to everything, and what we start we'll have to end. We thank you for coming to our studio and giving us insights into this landscape. We also thank all our viewers. Our concern is that since we are faced with too many challenges here, our children will have to upgrade their skills, upgrade their knowledge, upgrade their sense of profession to a level where they can compete with the people around the globe, and there are global spaces that are opening up. So we need to prepare our children for that. As community, as a regulator, as schools, all of us need to be very responsible, very transparent, and very capable of doing all these things. For now, we'll end up this discussion here. Thanking you once again, and thank you all the viewers. Thank you.
Thank you.